One decision made inside Buckingham Palace has fundamentally shifted the living arrangements of the British monarchy, breaking an unbroken royal tradition that stood for nearly 200 years. For generations, access to the Crown's sprawling estates remained tightly guarded, locked away behind formal protocol, heavy gates, and centuries of unquestioned habit. But a series of official announcements and property moves confirmed by palace officials has signaled the absolute end of that era. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why King Charles is altering the rules surrounding royal residences, how these decisions impact the wider royal portfolio, and what this dramatic restructuring reveals about the future of the British monarchy. To understand the scale of this shift, one must first look at the most famous address in the entire Commonwealth, Buckingham Palace. Since 1837, when Queen Victoria moved into the iconic 775-room landmark, every single reigning British monarch has called it their primary official home in London. It became the physical representation of the sovereign's presence in the nation's capital, serving as a private family residence and the executive hub of state power. However, royal officials have confirmed that King Charles and Queen Camilla will not move into Buckingham Palace as their permanent private residence, even after its massive 10-year, £369 million resurfacing programme reaches completion. Instead, the King and Queen will remain nearby at Clarence House, the home they have comfortably occupied for more than 2 decades. That decision instantly challenged a centuries-old norm. But why would a ruling monarch refuse to live in the principal residence of the Crown? The official explanation centers on functionality, financial modernization, and public accessibility. Clarence House is a scaled-down, functional residence that fits the royal couple's personal lifestyle far better than a massive 775-room office complex. By keeping the private living quarters inside Buckingham Palace vacant, the King enables the royal household to expand public tours, host dynamic exhibitions, and open historic state rooms to visitors year-round. Buckingham Palace will remain Monarchy HQ, the operational and ceremonial engine room of the state, but it will no longer function as a traditional private home for the sovereign. However, Buckingham Palace is far from the only property undergoing a radical change in purpose. To understand why this change is happening so rapidly, we have to look back at how royal property was managed during the 70-year reign of Queen Elizabeth II. During the late Queen's reign, the royal family expanded its presence across dozens of historical homes, castles, lodges, and country manors throughout the United Kingdom. Senior royals, working family members, and extended relatives often lived in grand residences granted under lifetime arrangements or favorable lease terms. Properties like Kensington Palace became bustling hubs, subdivided into multiple apartments to house various members of the royal family. While this system maintained centuries of tradition, it also created significant overhead costs for security, staffing, maintenance, and structural upkeep. As public scrutiny around royal finances increased over recent decades, the cost of maintaining multiple grand residences became a subject of frequent public debate. When King Charles acceded to the throne, royal commentators noted that one of his primary objectives was the creation of a slimmed-down monarchy. A slimmed-down monarchy naturally requires a slimmed-down physical footprint. The king recognized early on that having vast, multi-room palaces sit empty for 9 months out of the year was no longer sustainable in the modern era. Instead of serving as private retreats for extended family members, royal properties are now being reassessed based on their financial efficiency and public utility. This shift in philosophy marks one of the most substantial structural reorganizations of royal assets since the Victorian era. Yet, opening up Buckingham Palace and restructuring urban residences was only the first phase of a much wider real estate transformation taking place across the sovereign portfolio. Something far more significant was quietly unfolding just 25 miles west of London, inside Windsor Great Park. For more than 20 years, Royal Lodge, a sprawling 30-room mansion, served as the primary residence of the King's younger brother, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Under a long-term lease signed in 2003 with the Crown Estate, Andrew occupied the historic property alongside his ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson. Despite stepping back from public duties in 2019 following intense scrutiny surrounding his association with Jeffrey Epstein, Andrew remained firmly entrenched at Royal Lodge. For years, commentators noted an ongoing tension regarding the optics of a non-working royal occupying a Grand Crown asset that required vast upkeep and expensive private security arrangements. Then came the formal updates and reporting regarding the residence. Reports confirmed that the King initiated formal steps to review royal housing privileges, resulting in Andrew being asked to vacate Royal Lodge. This decision sent shockwaves through royal circles, signaling that personal standing would no longer override operational efficiency and public accountability. Plans were discussed for Andrew to relocate out of the 30-room estate into alternative accommodation, such as Frogmore Cottage on the Windsor estate or private lodgings on the King's privately owned Sandringham estate in Norfolk. This move highlighted a critical distinction within the royal real estate portfolio that few observers fully grasp. There is a fundamental difference between properties held by the Crown Estate and properties held privately by the monarch. The Crown Estate is a commercial property portfolio managed independently for the benefit of British taxpayers, with its revenue directly funding the sovereign grant. Properties like Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, and Royal Lodge belong to the nation in right of the Crown. By contrast, Sandringham in Norfolk and Balmoral in Scotland are the King's private personal property, inherited directly through his family line. Moving a non-working family member out of a taxpayer-linked Crown Estate property and onto a privately maintained estate carries deep symbolic weight. It visibly separates public state assets from private family arrangements. But what happens to properties like Frogmore Cottage when they become vacant? Frogmore Cottage itself has a rich and complex history within recent royal real estate moves. Originally renovated at significant cost prior to being used by Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, the cottage became vacant after the Duke and Duchess of Sussex officially vacated the residence. Rather than letting the updated four-bedroom property sit unused, it was repurposed to serve as potential accommodation for other family members or royal staff. This flexible redistribution of properties demonstrates a new operational model within the royal household. Properties are no longer treated as permanent lifetime gifts, but as dynamic assets to be reallocated based on actual need and public benefit. How are these estate management choices being applied across the wider country outside of London and Windsor? Look at Balmoral Castle in the Scottish Highlands. Historically, Balmoral served as a secluded retreat for the royal family, open to the public for only brief, limited periods during the summer months. Under the King's direct instructions, Balmoral has opened its doors wider than ever before, offering inner tour access to areas previously reserved strictly for the royal household. For the first time in history, visitors were granted access to interior rooms within the castle, allowing the public to see where the royal family spent their summer holidays. The demand for these public tours was so high that tickets sold out within hours of being announced. This commercial expansion generated substantial revenue that directly offsets the vast maintenance costs of the historic Scottish castle. The same public-first philosophy applies to Highgrove House in Gloucestershire, where public access to the organic gardens has been expanded to generate sustainable revenue for charity initiatives. Even Holyroodhouse in Edinburgh, the official royal residence in Scotland, has expanded its public exhibitions and educational programming. This broader strategy reflects a clear philosophy: royal residences must justify their footprint or pay for themselves through public usage. Instead of maintaining dozens of underutilized, costly residences exclusively for private use, the modern approach leans heavily toward public access, commercial self-sustainability, and streamlined living. Then there is the question of St James's Palace, one of London's oldest and most historic royal residences. While St James's Palace remains the senior official palace of the sovereign and the home of the Accession Council, its residential quarters are also being re-evaluated. Apartments within St James's Palace and Kensington Palace that were once reserved for extended royal relatives are increasingly being converted into working administrative offices or offered for commercial lease where appropriate. This shift minimizes the number of subsidized residential spaces maintained by the royal household. It aligns directly with the overall goal of reducing the burden on public funding while maximizing the utility of every square foot of royal real estate. Reports also suggest that Prince William fully shares his father's streamlined approach to royal housing. Prince William and Princess Catherine chose Adelaide Cottage, a modest four-bedroom home on the Windsor estate, as their primary family residence, rather than moving into a sprawling palace. They made this choice deliberately, opting to live without live-in domestic staff in order to offer their children a more regular upbringing. While they retain an apartment at Kensington Palace for official duties in London, their day-to-day living remains centred on a far smaller scale than previous princes of Wales. This choice represents a distinct generational shift in how the royal family views housing and personal luxury. The era of senior royals maintaining massive individual estates at public expense is rapidly giving way to a leaner, more modular model. When Prince William eventually accedes to the throne, observers expect this trend towards smaller personal residences and open public access to accelerate even further. What does this entire property restructuring mean for the future of the British monarchy? It shows an institution actively adapting to modern economic realities, public expectations, and scrutiny. By opening state-owned palaces to tourists year-round, ending long-standing lease privileges, and living in smaller, functional homes, King Charles is redefining the relationship between the Crown and its historic properties. This property strategy ensures that historic buildings are preserved for future generations while remaining financially viable and publicly accessible. It transforms ancient castles from closed symbols of privilege into active heritage assets that contribute to tourism and local economies. Buckingham Palace will remain the grand public face of the state, but it will no longer hide a private family behind its grand front gates. The royal portfolio is no longer just a collection of private family homes, it is a modern, publicly accessible heritage network. As these changes continue to take effect, the physical map of the British monarchy looks remarkably different than it did just a few years ago. Do you think these changes to royal residences reflect a modernizing monarchy moving in the right direction, or do you feel traditional customs should have been preserved? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this factual breakdown, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel for more detailed royal reporting.